Film and drama, and we have with us Matt Gallagher from Call Sheet, Stephen Haren, who's a freelance film editor, and James Johnson from Molyneux. And I wanted to start off by asking you, Matt, what sort of work you do, and what are the skill shortages that you see?
Well, what we do on the Call Sheet is we're a crew database. We provide jobs and opportunities for people. We have a lot of new entrants that come into the business, and we provided jobs we've posted jobs for films like The Imitation Game, Broadchurch, The Hollow Crown, loads of different things like that. We see quite a few skill shortages. Not necessarily at the runner level. I think we have a lot of runners, but we see a lot of skill shortages. There's not that many production coordinators about. I don't know if you get that. And props and unit managers and places like that. A lot of people are getting promoted quite quickly in the higher ranks. As there's more work coming into the industry, a lot of people are kind of rising up through the ranks a lot quicker than expected. And so there's a bit of a gap there where the people filling those roles that have been departed might not have the necessary skill set at that time.
But of course there are more students than ever wanting to get into the industry. Why aren't they getting in then?
Well, it's a good question. So depending on what figures you look at, there's around 30,000 graduates every year that come out with some sort of media or film degree. And that's not including people who want to get into the industry and that's not including people who come from different degrees. It's not coming from people, you're not including people from different countries, not including people who don't have any education or want to change careers. So you've got 30,000 people every year trying to force their way into an industry that is roughly 150,000 people. So every 5 years, you've got a pool of people the same size, and it's just not going to fit for everybody. And a lot of it, the extra challenges is...
But they're not getting trained into the roles that you need.
Well, I think the majority of people, 90% of the people that start in film and TV, drama, which is our focus, and I think the focus of the guys on the panel, 90% of people start as a runner. And then they work their way up, and they might get into the industry and find that actually, while I had my heart set on being a director, actually I've just seen this amazing first AD, or I've just seen this location manager, and I know now that is the thing for me. So you don't know until you get that on-the-job training necessarily. And I think that a lot of people hit the industry and find out that there's a lot more jobs and there's a lot more different roles out there.
Now, are there enough roles for runners?
No.
No. That's a definite no.
No, there's not enough roles for runners. There are a lot of runners. There are a lot of people wanting to get into the industry as runners. I mean, there's more people. There's online content. There's corporates. There's as well as film and drama and TV broadcast. There is a growing industry, but there is still a lot of people trying to get into a small number of people who are making the sort of proper stuff.
And Stephen, you're a freelance film editor.
Yep.
How do you see things?
Sorry, can you hear me? Is that working? Yeah. How do I see things? I think I'm freelance, so I'm kind of an individual with an agent looking for work and going on to film and TV production by production, so it's a slightly different thing to James, let's say, who works in facilities. But I suppose the thing that's affected things most is probably the shrinking of budgets, certainly from my side. So I started off I was a runner. I graduated from university, got a job as a runner, quite luckily at a good facility company in London, worked my way up there, and then eventually got a trainee editor role on a film and shot here at Pinewood actually, and then worked my way up through the kind of cutting room side as an assistant editor. And the thing I see most probably is, I get a lot of contact, a fair bit of contact from wannabe editors or wannabe assistant editors, through IMDb and things like this, or people who get your name. And there are lots of people coming out of film school looking for these jobs, but the budgets are so small at the moment that there's very, very few traineeships around. So you often find that, unfortunately, for the people involved, not necessarily for me, a lot of people are very willing to work for nothing.
So they're working as interns or work experience?
Well, that's a way to put it. Sometimes. I did a low budget film at the end of last year, and the budget was incredibly low, and I needed an assistant. And I know from experience exactly what a good assistant editor needs to do. I did it myself. It's a brilliant role. It's a really enjoyable role, but it's quite a demanding job. and I had to go and interview 3 people who had very little experience for that role, because I knew that we could pay them a very, very low rate. And it's a very, very difficult thing, because you know that I know what the job needs. You can't necessarily find, it comes down to budget, in my view, most of the time. You just can't, the budgets just aren't there on the lower independent side of the market,
So what sort
which
of
is
things
often what I'm doing.
are you working on then?
So I did a film called Northern Soul that came out in October, which was an independent film that was released in the UK in October. I worked on a show called Misfits for Channel 4 or E4. I've done some shows for BBC One. I had a thing called Our Girl last year. But
BAFTA nomination as well for.
Oh really?
Northern Soul.
Oh yes, BAFTA nomination for Northern Soul, not for me. BAFTA nominated, yeah. So I do kind of freelance film production, drama, comedy. My experience of TV has tended to be kind of drama and comedy and things like that.
So coming to you, James, at Molyneux, do you find you can find enough people to fill the roles that you need?
Well, in terms of runners, when I first started, we were very lucky in that we had a facility. We've got two big buildings in Soho. At the time, we had 3, and they employed 20 runners across the buildings. And so what that meant was that there was always enough runners, and there was always people moving on, really quick turnaround, whether it be up through the facility or into the facility for a runner who was leaving externally. The bit of the disconnect that I've found when I started, and what I didn't realise, was for people who wanted to be things like editors like Stephen, and audio editors sort of more specifically, and colourists, is that they weren't so aware that when they started as a runner, there might not be a trainee scheme for them to be in those creative roles. It's very much, you work your shift, and if you're lucky on your lunch break or after work, you then go and sit in with those people in your own time. And you gain their trust, they let you sit in sessions, they let you assist. And I think same thing for you, Stephen. They eventually you kind of move up. You become a sound editor, a dubbing mixer, re-recording mixer, or a colorist. And I think there's always enough runners, and those roles that training upwards, there is huge competition for them. So it is sort of oversaturated, as it were.
So in your experience, are things getting worse on that front then, of people being able to get in and learn enough to get a proper job?
Well, I think from when I started to where we are now at Molyneux, I know we're addressing the issue a lot more. So we have trainee schemes in visual effects and in sound post-production. Our colorist team are supported by a group of DI coordinators, data operatives, who are all working to be colorists, and we have schemes where they help out to do grading on short films, sound mixing on short films, which are internal policies, and there's red tape to get around. But we try to encourage it. But the fact is that unless there's a need, unless somebody moves on at the top, there won't be that sort of, or you expand. There's not that chance to move up unless at another external company that position becomes available.
And of course, it's not just the staffing, it's also the how you choose your kit and how you cope with the endless changes in technology.
Yeah, definitely. We've just hired a colorist in the last 6 months who has worked on the kit that we use, for instance. So there are, excuse me if I'm boring anybody, but there's sort of Baselight, DaVinci, Nucoda, general grading softwares, and we very much, although colorists tend to get a good mix of experience when they're working their way up, if they don't know a Baselight, then they're not going to be the right person necessarily, because there are a lot of things behind the scenes that they also help with, and they don't just colour a film, they also help with workflow.
So, Stephen, how do you cope with retraining as a freelance?
In editing, it's a bit simpler. Avid would be the primary piece of software which I use and would often insist on using if there is a choice at all. Most of the time, I mean, luckily actually Avid is, generally speaking, so good and actually has been so pervasive in the industry that I'm not really usually asked to look at anything else. Avid is obviously constantly developing its software, so yeah, there are little things that change. I think that maybe in terms of the retraining, the thing I do come up against more on the lower end of the production scale is editors being expected to do a lot more than just edit. So I think there's probably a problem across the board. But once the digital technology came into full swing in terms of shooting digitally, within the cutting room, you had to cutting rooms have essentially become labs as well as cutting rooms. So they're essentially doing what the lab used to do, and the lab used to be a fantastic part of the process. And so you're managing all sorts of, you're managing footage purely from technological way before you even get into the creative side of it. So that becomes a big pressure on assistant editors and editors as well to an extent. And also, like, if you're on oftentimes if you're working with quite inexperienced people on, let's say, short films or, you know, more unpaid stuff where people are trying to get their stuff going, they're also expecting you to grade it and things like that, which I have no ability for at all. So you have to fight for your corner a little bit sometimes. I think, you know, not that, obviously we all have to learn to move forward and progress, but I quite like just doing my job. You know, I'm there for a specific reason. I think part of what's happened with the shrinking of budgets and digital technology is that some of the roles have become a bit more diffuse, a little bit. There's just a slight loss of clarity, I think, in terms of who's doing what on a production, especially when you're shooting digitally, I think.
Yes. Is that what you find, Matt, that people get asked to do lots of different things?
Yeah, I think, for example, the role of the DIT is not properly defined. There's a big disparity between a big feature DIT and somebody doing other stuff.
So yeah, to explain, a DIT would be someone who kind of quasi sits beside the camera department and editorial. I mean, many people here probably know anyway, but you're shooting digitally on cards, and then that footage needs to get from the card and, roughly speaking, into the Avid. And they might be shooting in Scotland and cutting in London. So the old way of sending neg to a lab every evening, unfortunately, has gone. And there was lots of great benefits from doing it that way, apart from the fact that you had people checking your material for problems. So you don't have that. The quality control has arguably kind of gone out the window in terms of, because people are shooting so much. Often as an editor, it's very hard to even watch every single frame every single day if you're trying to keep up with the shoot. But yeah, sorry. So one of the things that has happened is that this role of the digital imaging technician has arisen, which are entirely essential. But production to production, from medium budget stuff I've done to lower budget stuff, the role is different every single time. It never seems to have there's no consistency in terms of the abilities of the person they have, to be blunt, and also in terms of what the production are expecting them and what I might expect of them, as opposed to a different cutting room.
So you find that, Matt, when people are booking jobs with you?
But also I think that, that there's a big, you know, someone will say, oh, we need someone to be a runner and a DIT at the same time. Whereas on a big feature film, there would be specialist departments with like a lab going on. But I don't know if people, I'm not sure of the organisations that are here today, but people don't necessarily know that they want to be a DIT when they join with the universities. That's not the career that it might not be open to them. They want to direct. So those sorts of training are on-the-job training type things. But there's so many roles like that it would be great to see that organisations pull in more people like that from the industry to be able to speak to their students and to be able to help them understand that these are the roles out there and not everyone can be a director.
So what do you think should change in terms of training for your industry?
In terms of training, well, I think you can teach a lot of people to use Avid, and I think you can teach a lot of people to use Pro Tools and how to point a camera and all those sorts of things. They aren't the skills that they're going to need from the moment that they leave university. They're going to graduate and they're going to be a runner, let's face it. For the first portion of their career, they're going to have to find their way in at an entry level. And the skills of operating those things are fundamental. You know, they're going to be great for a few years down the line. They're going to be fantastic. When someone gives you the opportunity, like James might get a runner that knows Avid and might be able to get in there and just kind of assist one of the senior editors there. That might be fantastic for them. So they've got that knowledge, but it's the soft skills that people need as soon as they come out of university to know how to approach the job market for one, and know how to behave and how to act on set. There's so many runners that come into the industry. They don't know what sides are. They don't know what dudes are. They don't know how to behave on the radio, not to, they don't know all these kind of small things that are going to help them in their first few baby steps into the industry. And I think if you're doing a 3-year course, it's invaluable just to have a 2-week section, just 2 weeks of just getting proper people from the industry and say, look, this is what a runner does. This is the difference between a post-production runner, and this is the difference between a set runner or a bass runner or a production runner. Those are the different things, because you're not going to go in and be a director. I mean, if you've got people from your universities that have done that, or from your courses that have done that, forgive me, but the majority of people go in at the bottom, work their way up, and then their eyes are open to these fantastic roles that might be out there that they never even considered before. So
okay, let's turn to the audience and have a few questions. Anybody got some questions? Gentleman here.
Hiya.
I should say we've got 5 minutes for questions, so can we keep them brief?
Sure. I'm Ash. I'm actually speaking later. I totally agree with you in terms of you'll come out of uni and most probably be a runner.
Yeah.
But what about those people who don't want to go into like a large-scale production, who want to work freelance, and now you've missed that chance to have camera skills, to work your own craft? What would you say to that? So if you don't want to go into a large scale, start freelance, start your own production company, and you're not learning those skills.
Who's that addressed to? Is it?
Why not? Well, Matt.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I quite understood it, but I actually think that runner roles are incredibly good. Actually, I think it's really worth doing. I did it myself. I know lots and lots of people who've done it.
I mean, you're better equipped to be a freelance if you've been a runner in ways, because you know how everything works. Is that what you mean?
I'm not sure if you're better equipped to be a freelancer. I mean, I was a runner as staff, at a company, at a facilities company in Soho. But I thought it was fantastic because I just learned an enormous amount, met lots of people. It was a lot of fun. It was hard work, not very well paid, but and you just met people and you just got to know the ins and outs of. I mean, mine was quite specific because I wanted to go into cutting rooms. Soho is the place to go, so it's a little bit more straightforward, let's say, to not necessarily to get into the industry, but at least you're there's a number of streets that you can kind of concentrate on. Whereas if you want to go into the production side, that's a broader canvas. But I would recommend trying runner jobs to everyone, really, because apart from, it's just a good experience, really. I don't know.
Okay,
what
next question. Gentleman there with the beard.
Hi, Barry Cobden. I'm sound supervisor and also taking part in the next session. But I wanted to challenge something that Matt's just said, and also Andy said earlier. You can't just train anybody to be a cameraman. I'm a sound man, so I'm not speaking for my skills.
Right.
You can teach somebody to operate a camera,
Yes.
but that doesn't make them a film camera operator or a television cameraman. I mean, those skills we were taught over 4.5 years.
You're quite right. You're quite right. What I meant is that it's possible to train somebody to operate a system. To actually be a cameraman successfully, it takes many, many years. Forgive me if I misspoke, but that was the intention.
Okay, next question. No hands up?
I think it's one.
Oh, have you had a question already? Yeah, no, I want someone else. Sorry, right, okay. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say I'm from the University of Northampton, from media production.
I think the runner isn't running. Sorry, just need to run. Yes, there we are.
Sorry, we're going too quickly. So I'm from the University of Northampton. My name's Matt Walsh. I just wanted to sort of pick up on what Matt was saying. We have a lot of people that come in to talk to our students about careers within the media industry. And I'm quite interested to know what you think would be a very useful set of skills for them leaving a course to actually have and demonstrate if they're going to go into working in the industry.
Into running, the Production Guild do a course. They do. They have runners' training days. They do around the country now. There's a company called Cool Time, and they do runners specific training for runners, and they have they're like, kind of like a diary booking service, and they're fantastic at doing that. And I think it's great that you get people in.
Well, of course, the ITTP with the approved
Yes.
skills, which we're going to be talking about in the next session, is trying to tackle some of that. That if you get that certification, then you'll know that employers will know that you're up to starting the job, which is the point.
I think in film and TV drama, I think the Guild one is probably one, and the ITTP one would probably be great for that. But to get people in is a really, really good thing. There's a school called, I don't know if they're here, makeup school called Delamar Academy, and a lot of the Delamar Academy or the Christie Blundell or those sorts of schools are quite clever because they get people in between contracts between like big long jobs. They'll get drama makeup designers to come in, and they'll teach these students in the room, and they're actually teaching the future trainees because they're eyeing them up for the next role, the next job that they've got. And that is a big crucial difference. Not all of the students are aware of this at the particular time, but the fact that they have a need and they have a role that they need to fill, and then they're looking at people who are skilled and trained, I think that's a really useful thing for those students who are going through that particular route.
Okay, another question? Oh, at the back there, on the right.
Michael Beckerton, Birmingham City University. There's a London-centric focus on production, obviously and clearly, but I get students from all over the country in all sorts of different regions who graduate and want to work and actually do want to work in the industry. And what advice can you give those students as to if they don't want to go to London to work?
You take over.
Anyone like to take that one?
Quick go at that one.
Let James have it.
James,
Well, I can take, because I didn't grow up in London.
Neither did I.
But I actually the reason I got my job was I was actually in a course in Birmingham. I met somebody who did work in London. And I think there are more and more jobs outside of London that people maybe just don't realise, because the diary services are based here, the major studios are based here, but you've got the BBC in Manchester, you've got the BBC in Glasgow.
Cardiff as well.
Yeah, you've got, I think Pinewood are planning to open in Wales as well.
Swansea or something.
Well, BBC have a massive place in Cardiff, don't
Yeah,
they?
so there are obviously it's
sorry,
major
is it
cities. It's major cities and people like Screen Yorkshire as well. There is an awful lot of places that are available around the UK. How well they're advertised and how well people know where to look for them, I think, is probably the bigger issue.
And Belfast actually is becoming, I'm from,
Yeah.
from Belfast originally, but Belfast from a production side is really growing. There are other options. I just happened to move to London because I knew that that's where I needed to do what I wanted to do, really.
Okay, final question. Yep, gentleman there with a moustache.
I'm Tony Manning from the Institute of Videography. I was interested in Matt's emphasis on the soft skills and the sense that some of the technical skills might bear fruit later. Now, to what extent do you think those things are issues that universities ought to be concentrating on in terms of social skills, working in teams, attitude, and so on? In order to have people who are ready to work in teams, or is it really a matter of luck that people have already got that and it's not trainable?
Yeah, that's true. It's hard. It's hard to teach those sort of soft skills, and it's a good point. I think the big problem when I speak to production coordinators who come to me and say we need to find a production runner, but can you find me one that isn't going to roll his eyes when we say we're working, a 15-hour day today? Can you find somebody that isn't going to complain who when I need to drive this tape over to this place? A lot of it is about attitude. The production managers say to me, look, I don't know what it is with this generation, and I'm sure that my generation was the same, being complained about with the other generation, but it's like it's the gimme instant gratification generation that I think a lot of people think, well, I've done my 3 years, I've paid my thing, I should be a director by now. But I think there is an element of that, and not everybody is like that. I know the gentleman earlier on picked me up on something, but not everybody is like that. And I think that just the reality check of preparing people that you are going to be working really, really long days. And if you roll your eyes at having to get the director lunch, you won't be asked back, and you won't get any feedback. You just won't be asked back. And that's, you'll be left wondering, what did I do wrong? And it's because you displayed a really kind of average attitude when there's 30,000, 29,000 other people out there that would be, dying to do that job.
Okay, young people never up to it, are they? No, but I do understand the point. Okay, well, thank you all very much, and please let's give them a round of applause. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
And we move on to our next session, which is we're going to hear about what the ITTP is doing, approved skills, in terms of approved skills and the future.
Correct title.
Right. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to looking at some moves towards solving some of the problems that we've raised so far. We've all agreed that there are problems and skill shortages, and training. Some training may not be up to it. So we're joined by Bernie Newnham from the ITTP, who's going to talk to us about that. He also is down here as being GTC and BKTS. You collect initials,
Not
Bernie?
me at all, no, that's them.
No? Oh, right, okay. Ian Davison from the Society of Television Lighting and Design. We have Barry Cobden from the Institute of Professional Sound. We'd like to know about mumbling on Broadchurch.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Wouldn't we all?
Martin Uren from Ravensbourne.
And BKSTS.
And BKSTS, right. And Brian Rose from the Guild of Television Cameramen.
Great.
Okay, so Bernie, start off and tell us a bit of progress since last year.
Yes, yeah, well, a bit, yes. I'm the face of ITTP for this sort of thing, really, this particular area. Last year we came here, I don't know if you lot came here, I certainly was here, and I listened. We had actually started it was about 2 years ago. A load of old blokes and a very young lady, if she's here, sat down in a pub with a pint and said, bit of a problem here, isn't there? And we all agreed that we thought there was a problem, that what was being delivered by education was not what the people who on the other end who were going to take them on wanted. It was very much characterized for me by my prop here. Graham and I had recently both, Graham, as taken on a camera assistant, and I with students, as a test that he tries on a regular basis. Here's one of those 4-ways things you get at home. Here are 3 red headlights. If you don't know what a red headlight, you're probably not in the right profession. Here are 3 red heads, 800-watt lights. How many, or 5 or 6 or whatever it is, how many can I stuff in here before the thing goes bang? Now, both of us had a problem that the students didn't understand the problem, if you see what I mean. They couldn't see how to solve the problem. And it's easy, it's Ohm's law, that's it. Why don't you know Ohm's law? Well, that's terrible. Someone mentioned Ohm's law here earlier on. It's the thing that there's a simple thing that everybody should know in order to get on in this profession, really. It covers almost everything. It's not big, it's just a small thing. If you don't know it, well, there you go. So the next thing we did was organize this conference whilst thinking about what the hell else we could do. And this conference and the last conference come under a university heading I now know called CPD, Continuing Personal Development. It's a way of getting people together to interface with each other and chat over lunch and listen to people talking so that everybody is sitting in the same world. That was the first thing we did. And in fact, we've already run courses back in the summer at the university. And there's an opportunity now for anyone at the universities here to talk to the ITTP, go and see Graham and say, we want to run a day's worth of explanation on your work, or whatever it is you want at your university, because the ITTP has found itself with a lot of friends basically in the middle. We know people. It's not us. We don't consider ourselves the grand panjandrums, but we are people who can say, oh, I know who does that. Would you like to go to so-and-so university and explain so-and-so? Yes, certainly. They'll pay you, hooray. That's a good way of working. And at the ITTP, we see the system growing, that we become a clearinghouse for professionals. Not us, necessarily. We don't think we're all powerful. But it's a way of a university saying, I really need to introduce my people to so-and-so. I don't know the industry. You do. Tell me what you can see. That's one arm of it. The other was, if the universities don't know what is required of them, like they don't know that it would be really useful to know Ohm's law before you leave the door, they aren't going to end up telling people the right things. And the industry then looks at them and says, well, they're no use. Now, I know that they're not no use, because I work at Kingston University from time to time for Susan doing the job, and I know they're not no use. I live with one foot in the education world. We then said, how do we fix this? And we looked, and actually I looked at a load of websites, and the first thing you find is that someone else has had this problem in another industry. It's all reinventing the wheel. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Everybody's done it already. If you want to be a plumber, you've got to pass City and Guilds grade 23/A or something or other. If you want to be an electrician, if you want to be an accountant or a pharmacist, you have to have passed a set of exams. Now, I don't think we're talking at the level of accounting and pharmacy in this. We're talking Ohm's law, for God's sake. But we said, why can't we draw up a list of skills? Why don't we get the guilds, who know what they're talking about, sitting here, to draw up a list of skills? They're the authority on this. They can draw up a list of basic skills so that someone who leaves university, and we're only talking at that level at the moment, in the area we understand, which is sound and lights and cameras. We'll do more later if it works. We can spread into anything. I know makeup are very eager to join in, and one or two other people are very eager to join in their area as well. They like to be part of a growing ball of interest, whatever it is. So we started asking about skills, and we now have a little list of skills that we think are more or less the right things. There's more work to be done. But the people we asked are these ones here. And we'll come back to me later, Ian.
Okay. So what did they ask you, Ian?
That's a good question. I think it was a very general statement, first of all. And the reason for coming to us is that as Institute and Society and Guild members, we're passionate about our craft. That's why we're members of a craft organisation. And we're all passionate about keeping that craft going. So bringing on new people, essential. So what do these new people need to know? I've got a foot in both camps, because working for Sky, I've been part of a team recruiting new people and interviewing them and trying to work out what it is I need from them to do the job that I need. So again, running training courses for people, I always have brought it right down to basics. Absolute basics. Even I'm running a high-end craft course, I'm bringing it right down to basics to make sure people understand what it is they're coming in to do. So if you're talking about lighting, which is my craft specialism, everyone talks about three-point lighting. Now, you can learn three-point lighting by book, by rote. But if you ask a person why they put that key light in that position, they can't tell you. So I think it's very important to make sure we equip the people coming into our industry with a background about why we do things. Not how to do things, but why we do things, because that's a transferable skill. So from my point of view, it's about deciding core skills, which I think will apply across all the crafts initially, to say, right, these are the things you need to know about to make that next step. So you give them that first core understanding, why we do things, how we do things in this particular situation.
And everything won't be by candlelight, as per Wolf Hall, which is the first time that lighting has been in the news for donkey's years, isn't it?
Well, my view on that, if candlelight's the best way to light it, that's the way we should go.
It can't all be in candlelight, though. They must have done something else. I'm sure somebody here will know.
News would be interesting, wouldn't it?
It was very atmospheric, very good. Anyway, Barry, from lighting to sound, what are your concerns?
Well, they're my concerns as a working sound supervisor. Also, as a member of this institute, which is a guild to all practical purposes, and I'm wearing my prop, mind your ears, Nick. And I put a feeler out on the net on our website, and I said to other working sound supervisors, look, what basic skills, as Ian's been saying, what basic skills do you expect to find so that you can, if you take an assistant on who is going to be paid, and as somebody earlier today said, they've got to fulfill a useful role, what skills do you need? We've got a list. I'm not going to read it all out, but we came up with a list. It's not exhaustive. We can add to it. And we can also detract from it if it turns out that one or other of these, and they're just titles at the moment, is too advanced for the level we're considering. That's also a possibility. But, you know, Ohm's law, yes, I teach that when I'm asked at the National Film School, though this year they didn't want to do it. I don't know why. Rigging and testing a radio microphone. Sorry, Mark. Sorry. Nick. Safety, of course, uppermost in everything that everyone does. Considerations for the venue. When we finish taking up the duct tape, there's not going to be too much glue on the floor. General personality requirements of people who can do it. Punctuality, good sense of humour, good interpersonal skills. If you're going to put a radio mic on a lady artist, you do, believe me, need interpersonal skills. There's a list. We can publish that list. As I've already said, I'm here as a member of the Institute of Broadcast. It was called the IBS before. It's now called the IPS, Institute of Professional Sound. With their approval, with this list, which has their approval, and this is going to be a starting point, I hope, within sound for these skills which we can evaluate. If somebody can't do this job, then they're not an assistant. And if anybody from any of the academic institutions wants to teach a sound assistant, among other disciplines, they can teach the academic theory, the dissertations on broadcast production, but also this stuff needs to be included because you can't, at the moment, you can't find enough people with it. One of the most difficult questions I get asked when I'm teaching is, how do I get a job? And I'm afraid, as semi-freelance, I've actually been freelance for the last 12 years, and the BBC have taken me back again, which is quite nice for me. But it's one of the most difficult questions to answer. Learn this stuff. Yeah? I turned to a friend of mine who used to be one of my students. Learn this stuff, and it will get you a fair way. It won't get you all the way, of course. You've got to start somewhere. In your job applications, I think it's rather sad, actually, that the only way in is to start as a runner for an indeterminate period of time. Somebody wants to be a runner or somebody wants to be in production, that's a very good way in. But for somebody who wants to be in one of the technical areas for which we were trained over 16 weeks at the BBC's training establishment and then 3 or 4.5 years on the studio floor learning to be a boom operator before you could even get your hands on a fader was important. Sadly, I don't think the BBC does quite so much of that training now. It was expensive. I think that's a great pity. I had a wonderful training. So that's where we want to start. We've got a list. I can publish it afterwards if you want, of the various skills, and then we can evaluate those skills if people are being given them.
Okay, Martin, there's been quite a bit of careful criticism of universities and colleges. With Ravensbourne, have you always had, obviously you've got practical courses, but I mean, have you always had any of this etiquette and how to behave on location, how to behave in studios?
Yeah, well, that's embedded in all of the production courses at Ravensbourne.
Yes, I can.
And I think the kind of role of a course is, I've got two hats I'd like to talk about for a moment.
So which one do you want to wear for first?
Well, let's talk the Ravensbourne one. I think the role of an HE course is to provide underpinning knowledge that it is very difficult to acquire on the job, and to provide practical experience where that's possible if you have the right resources to be able to do that, and more particularly industry practitioners who can come in and pass on their knowledge through practical exercises, for want of a better word. And the nearer those become to industry practice, the better. And I think that's the role of HE in terms of not an academic HE course, but a practitioner kind of HE course. If we're trying to produce people who are graduates who are fit for work, then we have to give them, by as many means as possible, exposure to the work environment, including work placements and work experience and all that kind of thing. Now, with my other hat on, there's a BKSDS hat on, we've been running a course accreditation scheme for a large number of years now. It's kind of bubbled along with a number of courses being accredited on that program. We've now put in place in the last few years effectively an accreditation manager who is looking after that scheme, and we're now growing that scheme because we've got a dedicated person in place who can manage to do that. We've decided to do it reasonably slowly, and we are expanding every year with more courses being signed up. And our fundamental criteria of whether a course gets BKSDS accreditation, remembering that BKSDS is not like the other girls. We have a kind of really broad church that our membership represents. And so we're looking kind of across the board at the range of skills that are required of either film or television production industries or post-production, etc., is what, it's not an academic measure of the course. There are other bodies that do that. What we're doing is looking at the course, looking at the equipment that the students get access to, the experience and knowledge of the people teaching the students, the industry relevance of the experience the students gain on the course. So it's very much looking at what the likely or potential outcome of that course is to produce a graduate who is fit for work.
And what did you think of the suggestion that it would be good to have an industry levy, like the film levy, that would actually help with trainees, which would help your students, wouldn't it?
I think absolutely.
In theory.
Well, if the levy is the only way of changing the attitude, then it's partly an attitudinal thing, I think. I think what the ITTP are potentially doing in terms of the approved skills idea for new entrants to the industry, it works hand in hand with the idea of course accreditation. If we can produce something which is, a course which is likely to produce graduates, that doesn't mean to say that all of its graduate cohort will be suitable for work in industry, because that's down to the individual and what they pick up from the course. And after that, if we have an accreditation scheme based on the individual and their skills and aptitudes and things, then I think that forms a kind of a really good double-handed approach to making sure that the courses that are in place are capable of providing suitable professional graduates, and that the other side of it is once they've started work in the industry, then their skills can be assessed, or even potentially during the end of that program. I think that depends on the nature of individuals and how they would then manage that transition into work.
Do you happen to have the figures for how many people from Ravensbourne do get employment in the industry, roughly? Sort of what proportion of students?
Okay, I can't quote figures for other than my own courses, so I run the broadcast engineering courses, I'm teaching on the broadcast engineering courses, and basically we get 100%. So all of our graduates who wish to will gain employment in their chosen area. Of course, that doesn't mean to say that one or two people won't, because they've decided that the industry might not be for them. But all of those who go through I have difficulty keeping them, to be honest. We've heard earlier on about the shortage of broadcast engineers, or suitably skilled engineering graduates. So my students often get tempted, let's say, and there's a kind of battle sometimes to keep them to the end of their course, because there is this desperate need. The best area in which, the best way of progressing that is the partnerships, which we're exploring more and more with various organisations who are out there in the industry. I think the idea of partnering between industry and education, we've heard it earlier on about to ensure that the course content matches the industry needs. And the best way of doing that is to have industry partnerships. And I think that's, from the point of view of producing fresh engineering and production talent for the industry, I think that's the best approach, is to ensure that courses don't produce or don't have syllabuses which are not relevant to the world that they're addressing. As we've heard again earlier on, it's such a rapidly changing industry. We have these changes in roles, the introduction of new roles, the DIT role, which was mentioned earlier, and this area of mixing traditional broadcast engineering skills with IT and networking related skills is it's difficult for courses that are more isolated to pick that kind of thing up and to go with it in moderating it, changing their syllabus to match up with industry requirements. And I think the more we have partnership arrangements with industry, the more chance there is of that
Sounds as though
happening.
you ought to have partnership arrangements with other universities, running courses for them, if your courses are so popular.
Yeah, I think that there are areas. The difficulty is that HEIs are in competition for students, and
But some
it's
FE
therefore more
colleges will
difficult.
take degree courses from universities, won't
Sorry,
they?
I missed
So it just occurred to me that some FE colleges will take a degree course which is accredited by a university. So you're being, kind of HE rather than FE, you can. Anyway, just a thought. Sorry, being creative there. Sorry. Right. So Brian, you're from Guild of Television.
Correct.
Cameraman. So what are your main concerns?
Right from the beginning, from 1972, when the Guild was formed, we've been absolutely passionate about skills and about quality of work. That's, after all, why we're all here in this hall today. We've been undergoing a transition, and I think we've all heard how the industry itself is transitioning. One of the reasons you've got an old codger like me on the stage today is that most of our council are actually out there now working. Now, it wasn't true always. The council tended to be people who were retired or near retirement. We've now got far more and more younger people joining the Guild. We have a huge number of students joining the Guild, and I'm glad also to say, despite our name, we have more and more women joining the Guild. In fact, we have a higher proportion of camera women in the Guild than there are in the industry. In this passion for quality and standards, we are involved. I think it's work in progress. One of the areas I'm concerned of now as welfare officer, and I joined the council as standards officer, then became chairman, then became welfare officer. But one of my main concerns is interpersonal skills and set etiquette. And we're finding more and more that young people joining the industry, especially students, who are members are able to put on attachment to productions, don't have those skills.
What sort of things?
The skills are turning up on time.
Yes.
We had a case that came up, one of my colleagues on council, he took on 3 students for attachment on a production, on a good production. None of them turned up because they'd all been at a party the previous night. And all were drunk. It's really important that students understand that right from the beginning. That is the end of your career. It's as simple as that. And we have to be strict with people. So I spend a lot of time talking to youngsters and students about those interpersonal skills. Why can't I get any work? Well, that's just how I am, and you have to say, well, you have to learn those skills. So what we're learning constantly is that the kind of assessment and training needed, in other words, assessing the people being trained and assessing the trainers, is actually taking a much broader church, and also being aware, as I think we are, that those skills are changing. We started off purely in multi-camera, outside broadcast studio shows and shiny shows. we now get more and more members working in single camera work, documentaries, and drama. So it's taking that broad church and trying to, I think, offer the advice of what is needed. So in many, many cases, it's the same. Again, as I said, what I happen to be involved in at the moment, the interpersonal skills are very, very important, and I don't think they're being taught in colleges.
Well, you see, when you're talking about the interpersonal skills, this isn't necessarily the universities. This might start back in the schools, that people don't
Absolutely.
get... I know, because I was a governor of an FE college at one point, and the problem of punctuality and making people turn up, and I said, well, why don't you have a points system that it goes towards your course, that, you know, if you're not punctual, you don't turn up. I mean, they were very big on people not turning up at all, but the being late thing was never really tackled because, of course, that's the point. The colleges are interested in getting people through the exams. So if they turn up at all and get through the exams, this is good. So it is quite difficult, but I mean, I think it is a problem that punctuality isn't considered important in some schools as well.
It's not totally lacking. I was involved in an organisation called First Light and Second Light, where we took youngsters who might not have been able to go to university. In other words, we're talking about it at Sky, people perhaps from a background that wouldn't normally go to a university and spend the £9,000 a year, plus accommodation, plus expenses. And they run these, it was like a 6-week, very, very intensive course. I brought them here to Pinewood and to Arimedia down the road. And they were fantastic. First of all, they drained me absolutely dry with their very relevant questions. And by golly, they turned up on time and were ready.
Yes. Bernie, has the ITTP thought of going to link with FE colleges at all? Because that used to be the place where people did HNDs.
Yes, we are involved. Graham could tell you a bit more about it. There's an FE college in central London who really want to join in with us. But I haven't really been part of that, so you'd have to ask Graham.
But that's obviously an area to explore.
It's obviously an area,
It's not just universities.
Yes. I mean, shall I expound on that now?
Just briefly, and then we'll have some questions, and then you can tell people about your leaflet.
Okay, well then I won't do that.
Okay, right. Okay, so now we'll have some questions. Question, gentleman there.
It's Phil Middleham from Stratford-upon-Avon College. We're an FE college and an HE college. So just fascinated with the panel's discussion there. One of the problems that we've had recently, and over the past few years as well, but very critically recently, is that we lost some of our more experienced lecturers who had experience within the industry. But we have found it really difficult to replace these people, mostly because we will put the advert out and we'll be inundated with people that have the experience, no question. But the problem that we have is that Ofsted rock up and say, but they haven't got a teaching qualification. And that is a real problem within what we're trying to do as a college, because I applaud this. I mean, this is what drove me into education in the first place, that we just, I was on location, I kept getting these graduates who just couldn't do a job. They just had no idea, and yet had wasted 3 years of their lives, within a university, with respect to universities. And I just felt I had to try and get in there, but it was really, really difficult without a teaching degree. So I took a teaching degree, but that was just bloody mindedness on my part. And it is very, very difficult to find people that you can actually integrate within your,
So you're saying there should be possibly just as an induction course for people who haven't done any teaching before, and then they could go ahead and get on with it?
Well, I think Ofsted should actually come into the real world. I think that would be more the way around, because, I mean, yes, it helped me to learn to be a teacher, certainly. And yes, you're right, you can have a short fast-track course, which would be perfectly fine. But until you educate Ofsted into actually realising that it's so important to have real experience within FE, HE, including universities, of course, then, it is going to be an enduring problem. I think.
Okay, another question. Yeah. Gentleman here.
Hello. My name's Mark, and Mark Trompetella, and I'm a colleague of Martin's on BKSTS. And I'd just like to sort of reinforce that, or open it up to the floor, really, in terms of with the revitalisation of the accreditation scheme in BKSTS, what we've noticed is that there are some fundamental forces that often have taken place in the last 10 years in HE and FE that have worked against some of the issues that have been discussed this morning. And they are things like a partial commodification of FE or HE, forces in terms of if you can have larger classes with less technology input, specialist resources and things like that, that's a pressure on the course teams who are ex-industry professionals who know what things are, but there's a sort of senior management or an accountant's pressures to work against that. And the other thing is structural things. Some of the structural things are like the Cert Ed or the teacher qualification, but also the fact that you have the production students in one block who are short of particularly types of cameras. Then you can have an engineering department that might be 2 miles down the road, and they've bought, the latest camera equipment, and they have it in pieces, and they don't talk to the production-based students. And then you may have the arts box. So there's things in terms of the structure. The beautiful thing about a professional body coming in, either the ITTP or BKSTS, as part of an accreditation scheme, is you can act as a catalyst of change. And I think many of the people who are teaching production-based courses have institutional things above them that the industry doesn't always appreciate and needs to go in and act as a catalyst to change, because the senior management may listen to an outside body in writing a report. And I think, I don't know if that's true of FE or HE colleagues who are in the room, but I think it's a way that the industry can go in and try and assist with that change.
Okay.
Just come back to that, just to echo.
Briefly.
Because it is down to management, absolutely, down to accountants, and it's just by browbeating them that I'm here today. They paid for me to come today and I'm going to take this back to them, and they're going to see it, because it's what will give us more students, and it's what will give better students to the industry.
But the other thing, of course, is that a lot of universities and colleges, the students are not doing the courses for fun anymore. They want a job. So if you can guarantee, and clearly there's a need for people, if you can guarantee them some sort of job, they're going to be more interested, aren't they? Yes, gentleman here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Alan Haig from the University of Surrey, a teacher of Ohm's Law and interpersonal skills. I've enjoyed the moaning. I really, really enjoy it. I think, again, just very briefly, I'm not here to talk about myself at all. The £9,000 thing, I'd just like to reiterate that you don't pay that. It's a loan. You don't pay it at the time. A lot of people think that poor people can't go to university because they don't have £9,000 on them. And also, the other thing, that's not gone up over the past 5 years. It's still 9,000 now. There's been a lot of inflation. The only thing universities can do is to take more students on if they're going to remain with the same income, unless someone's going to put that up with inflation. I don't think there's any political will to do it. So there are pressures on universities. What I'd like to say briefly is what the panel asked briefly is what the panel thinks about squaring a difficult circle. I'm just starting a new course in what can loosely be described as operational engineering in film and TV. And all the applicants want to be film directors. And I'd like to teach them technical things, and I think that would be great. But if I do that, then will they say I've failed and I've not made them into a film director because they've paid their money and they want to be a film director, please, and it's your job to do it. So what do I do? Do you have to sneak the technical things in, or what? Or is there another way of explaining to sort of teenagers what the industry's like and what they should be getting into?
I think the regular teenage thing is I want to be famous, I want to be a director of, I want to be Steven Spielberg, or I want to be Tom Cruise, or whatever it happens to be.
Or I want to make documentaries.
Or whatever
That's
it
the
is.
other one.
It's a teenage thing. You look at, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a fighter pilot in the RAF. That you look at the simple things and you don't know the other things are there. At Kingston, I have gone around for years saying, if you want to be a broadcast engineer and you can get the right level of qualification, they're desperate for broadcast engineers. And I know broadcast engineers who've ended up as directors and producers at the BBC. It's a different way to what you want. Well, Susan Scotcher down there, yes. Yeah, you start off in engineering because there's a need for engineers. We need engineers. Okay, now you're an engineer and they're paying you well to be an engineer and it's all really wonderful. You look across the room and you want to be that director. One way or another, it's possible to become either an engineer like Susan or a cameraman like me, that senior producer at BBC Television, which is what I left as. It's possible. It's pragmatism, really, I think, is the way to do it. It's pragmatic. They need these people, but eventually you might be able to become those people.
Can I make somebody else who teaches Ohm's law? That I think I teach across both sets of courses. I teach on engineering courses, but I also teach on production courses, and I'm embedding those technical skills in the production course. I think you can make it relevant. I think sneaking it in is one way to put it, but actually if you connect with somebody and they get why they need to know it, then that's the battle. And so I think there is a way in which you can embed more technical content than the student necessarily realises they're undergoing, if I put it that way. And I think it's just embedding it in. You can embed it in practice, and in as practical way as possible, and that includes maths.
Okay, one final question, gentleman here.
Thank you. Phil Berry from Great Yarmouth College, which is also part of UCS, University of Suffolk. I teach a foundation degree in visual media production, which is a post-production course. It is a foundation degree. Now, over 10 years ago, this same sort of conversation was going on, and foundation degrees were then implemented by the education departments and the industry because the broadcast industry says we needed more people with skills. And yet here we are again doing the same thing, saying we need more people with skills from universities. So the foundation degrees, I think, still have a body of work to do, but we do need that input from the industry and people like yourselves to really, really engage with the foundation degrees, because they were set up specifically to bridge that gap between industry and academia. And I'm not sure that bridge is fully formed yet.
Okay, thanks. Ian,
I think that you're making a very good point here, and I have a big worry, and one of those is time scale. We're talking about the same things we talked about last year. How much progress have we made since then? And also the other thing I worry about is the scale of what we're talking about, because in the Society of Television Lighting and Design, we're talking about a very small core number of people in the industry. We're a tiny part of this great organization. Whereas I look out in further education and higher education, it's a mammoth scale. So how can our very few of us make an impact on that huge pool of people out there? And that's a very difficult thing to achieve.
Well, one of the things might be that this leads to a job. If it does lead to a job, it doesn't just lead to well, I say just lead to freelance, but I mean, most people, some people like freelance, but others would prefer to have a job.
I think it's essential, and if you listen to Darren, who's my boss at Sky, we recruited 6 new people in at a base level. And that's a great thing for us to do. We've trained them in lighting as a core skill, given them a bit of camera work, but they're now placed to move into new areas, decide where they want to go, discover what it's like to be a cameraman, discover what it's like to be a vision mixer. And that's what the bigger corporations can do.
Barry.
Yes, that was interesting what you say, because I did some teaching on this course at the National Film School, which was part of what Sky had promoted. And speaking to the course lecturer, he said, can't find enough students who are interested in doing sound, which is important.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I can remember here last year, one of the wonderful students who was helping us out, who was actually operating the camera, said again, oh, I don't just want to be a technician. I want to be a director, you know, and I think a lot of us in this hall were shocked. There's an ancient Buddhist saying, which is in Japanese, itai doshin, which means many in body, one in mind. I'm actually quite optimistic, and I actually think that the ITTP is going to take an absolute lead in the industry expanding and the universities having more power to convince government that skills training should be skills training. I didn't go to a university. I went to what is now the University of Westminster, was then called Harrow Tech, at Harrow, believe it or not. I did a course in photo science and scientific photography. It was a 3-year course, and we were told, you do not look for a job when you leave. You sort out between the job offers, and that's actually what happened to most of us, because that course was specifically written by the government, because at the time they needed desperately scientific photographers.
Okay, thanks very much, Brian, very important.